we know you grew up in a small steel town in Pennsylvania and would go on to become one of the most important voices in the pursuit of interfaith understanding. So, where did that passion for religious bridge building and interfaith dialogue come from? I mean, maybe my own naivety, but I wouldn't expect a small steel town in Pennsylvania to be sort of that cultural melting pot. So, was it prevalent in your home growing up, or where did that come from?
Well, actually, we hear a lot about the clash of civilizations, and I kind of grew up in the clash of civilizations, in the sense that small steel town was extremely religiously diverse, but not in a good way. I mean, there it was very segmented. There was Eastern Orthodox, there were Catholics, there were Protestants of different kinds. At some point in my teenage years, the evangelical church opened up, and to a large extent, there was a lot of kind of uh, divisions, and particularly when the evangelical church came, a lot of kind of animosities that existed in that little town. In addition, in my own home, my father was Jewish and my mother was Christian,
Hmm.
and they divorced in part over religion. So religious conflict was a part of my home. Religious conflict was a part of the environment that I grew up in. And in fact, uh, largely because of that, for a number of years, by the time I was a senior in high school, I just was fed up with religion. Religion was doing nothing but bad things in my world. And so I became kind of an atheist for several years, actually, throughout most of my college time, because I just didn't want to have anything to do with religion. But I kind of had a spiritual yearning. It never, even during those periods of where I was kind of a very hostile atheist in some ways, I still had a spiritual yearning that was not being satisfied. And so I felt by the time I was a senior in college that I needed to, maybe I needed to really try to find a place where I thought my religion I could park my spirituality in some religion. I just felt that that was necessary. So I was studying international relations, economics. I wanted to have a career in the State Department, but I thought that this was important personally. So I kind of shifted gears. I went to Harvard Divinity School to study comparative religion. And while I was doing that, I was attending various churches and synagogues, and I even went to a Hare Krishna group for a little while. I mean, I was really trying to find a spot where I found comfortable. And at one point, somebody actually who was a Unitarian Universalist minister who I had been talking to recommended that I go to this mosque that was in Boston, well, outside of Boston, a little town called Quincy, Massachusetts. And I thought that was like the most ridiculous suggestion, because the Iranian hostage crisis had just ended a year or two earlier. And all I knew of Islam was these very frightening pictures of people chanting death to America. But anyway, I decided, for the sake of just crossing it off, I'd go. And I went. And it was during Ramadan. And it's a kind of a long story, but a long story short, I was in the back of the mosque, just sort of observing things. I was about actually to leave. I didn't know anything about what happens in a mosque when the call for prayer happens, breaking the fast. And a guy comes out and he's giving out dates to everybody, and I was kind of hiding in the corner, so he missed me. And I started like, what is he giving to everybody? And I was looking to try to see what it was, and it was a date. And the guy whose hand I was looking at made eye contact with me, and then I remember he looked directly at my hand, which was empty, and suddenly he takes one of these two dates, he leans over and he gives it to me.
Hmm.
And I was very struck by that. I mean, here's a guy who's been fasting all day, all night. It was back in the time, it was 33 years ago, so it was around this time. And he had just given me one of these tiny pieces of fruit that he had been given, and he didn't even know me. And so I just had this realization, or this feeling suddenly, that there was a spirit of generosity in Islam that I didn't know existed. And I
Hmm.
kind of went back and I opened up a Quran for the first time, and I happened to turn to a page that talked about Christians, Muslims, and Jews all being able to enter the kingdom of heaven as long as you did good and believed in God and those kinds of things. And so suddenly that all that conflict that I had been living through and I had left behind or tried to leave behind was in a way healed in just reading that passage. Like here was a religion that kind of combined them all. Here was a religion that wasn't saying, if you're not fitting in my box, if you don't have my faith statement, you're going to hell. And so I just said, this is a place where I feel that I could park my faith. And so I did, kind of naively, because I didn't realize how much prejudice and bias there was against Muslims at that moment, even though I myself had some, but I didn't realize how much the world did and how much conflict there was around these issues, particularly in society in America. So that kind of why I started doing interfaith work. It was sort of the feeling that I had been sort of running away from the clash of civilizations my entire life. I had thought I found a faith where I could finally feel peace, and it wasn't. So it was, to me, like I needed to do something, and that's how it all began.
If you like that clip, make sure you like and subscribe to see more conversations and content featuring Muslim creators from around the world. The Halal Gap is a Mosquers production. Make sure you search Mosquers Film Fest on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok to learn more.
And Twitter.
And Twitter.
There's 4 of them.
If you do that type of thing.